We're going to go out to actually Nashville, where the hero police officers from that tragedy that happened with the mass shooting at a Christian school in church, speaking out and talking about the day that they came to save so many children there after that mass shooter was shooting up the school. So we are going to hear from them directly right here on Live Now from Fox. Let's listen.
I was working in a regular duty capacity that day. I want to start by obviously saying my deepest condolences to the family, the 6 lives lost on the 27th of this month. I'm going to do my best to relay my rendition of my day. It was a regular work day for me. For some reason, I was feeling tired. I'm a proactive unit. I work for the Central B-Detail bike team. I guess I hadn't finished my coffee and I wanted to complete some administrative tasks. So I wanted to go to the Metro Police Academy. I had some business to attend to there. En route there, that put me in the Midtown sector. So I really had no business being where I was. I think you can call it fate or God or whatever you want, but I can't count on both my hands the irregularities that put me in that position when a call for service came out for an act of deadly aggression at a school. I immediately turned on my lights and sirens, knowing the severity of such a call. Like Sergeant said, it demands ample resources in which I was available. Like I said, I was tending to myself. I've been to, I don't know how many false act of deadly aggression calls. Something told me it was time to really get to this one. I treat them all the same, but I was driving as safely as I could get my body there. I don't know the area. I needed to put it in GPS. When I arrived, I don't know the layout of the school. Luckily, due to the bravery of 2 staff members, they stayed on scene, they didn't run, and they gave me concise, clear information for me to use to help anyone in danger. The gentleman gave me, like you said, the exact key I needed to enter the building. It was readily apparent I was going to be the one to make entry, and I've been given my training. I know my role, and I made entry with the personnel I had, and luckily I had some. I saw there were patrol units, and I asked for people to join me as I had a key. I was unaware there were any other access points other than the one I had. As the sergeant said, I did not have stimulus at the time. I was intently listening, so we cleared the hallway we had, room by room, until we made it into the lobby. Like I said, I don't work with anyone that was there that day, so we had to use plain speak to understand each other's roles, what we had to do. When I did hear stimulus, I couldn't get to it fast enough. I just looked for the nearest staircase I could find because I could tell it was above my head. Eventually, following the guidance of other officers, I luckily deployed my my rifle kept walking towards the gun, the sound of gunfire. There was, like Sergeant said, some smoke in the air. It was very similar to the training we receive, the stress inoculus that our training academy had exposed me to before this incident. I definitely wish I had also deployed my rifle caliber rated heavy plates when I found myself at the front of the stack, where I found the stimulus or the threat, the second floor of the school. Like Sergeant said, work wasn't over. We didn't know if there was another threat. Immediately took teammates I am not used to working with to start clearing rooms, escorting children and teachers along. And there were more personnel and resources at this point. I was able to guide them out, basically similar to the way I had came in, and just tried coordinating best with supervisors and fire personnel until I was relieved of duty on that scene. I was told to sit in my car. And that was pretty difficult because I could tell there was more work to be done. That's about the day that I had on the 27th.
Thank you, Rex. Detective Mike Colazo is a 9-year veteran of this police department, and he is assigned to the same unit as Sergeant Mattis. In fact, he works for Sergeant Mattis. Sergeant Mattis is his supervisor. Detective Mike Collazo.
I want to start with making sure the families know that we're thinking about them. I know a lot of people have reached out to myself, Officer Rex, Sergeant Mattis, our teammates as well. There's been an outpour of support from the community, from other agencies throughout the nation and through the world, and I just want to tell them we greatly appreciate that. But I also hope that that along with all of us, that we remember the victims. And about that day in question, like Sergeant Mattis had stated, we had just started our shift and we were at the office. I was completing some administrative task, sending some emails when the radio was, I believe I had my radio sitting on my desk. One of our partners, Detective Wagner, he sits to the left of me. I believe his radio was there, and we heard the 1,000 code go out of the active shooter, and we heard the dispatch location and that it was in Midtown. Regardless if it was in Midtown or not, like every other officer in our department, we took off running out of the office, plugged in the address on our GPSs, and we took off towards the location. As we were on our way to the school itself, our dispatch was doing a phenomenal job. They were giving us as much updates as they could. They told us that the individual had entered into the school. They were actively shooting, gave us a description, and they were receiving this information from the individuals that were already on scene. When I arrived on scene, another officer had already arrived on scene. To this day, I still don't know who that officer is. There was hundreds of officers that responded. But I've learned that that officer had arrived on the other side of the school. I came off of Harding Pike and entered coming up the hill towards the school. When I started to approach, or when I pulled my car up, I observed a female on a cell phone, who later found out was one of the employees of the school. The female was pointing to the left, so I ended up pulling my vehicle towards the left. I ran into another individual, a male that was outside, rolled my window down, asked where they were. That individual, who I later learned was also an employee of the school, told me that they were around the side and asked where. And at that point, without hesitation, the employee just took off running towards the door that was later learned to be where the shooter had entered. He took off running and telling me to follow him, which helped out tremendously. So I stayed in my vehicle and drove that direction. He was kind of hugging around the vehicles that were parked on the side because, like they said, we didn't know where the shooter was. He just knew that the shooter had entered into this door right at the entrance. So he said when he got closer to the door, he pointed and told me that they had entered right there. So I ended up parking my vehicle, exiting, and noticed that all the glass to that door had been shot out. Saw shell casings on the ground, bullet holes on the door. So I immediately made entry. As I made entry into the school, I saw an individual that I believe has been identified as the janitor. He was laid out on the ground, not moving. I relayed that information to the over our radio to the dispatch that I had made entry and that I had an individual that was down. Still didn't have a stimulus. The shooter wasn't shooting at that point. So started just like Officer Rex, Sergeant Mattis, and every other officer that had gotten there, started clearing rooms as fast as possible, trying to find where the shooter was. I was on the first floor. I had cleared part of the first floor and along with the gymnasium when I had somehow made my way towards a door that led me back outside. That's where I made contact with one of our teammates, Detective Wagner, and two patrol officers. At that point, we were told that the shooter was possibly on the second floor. So at that point, that's when on the body cam you see where we ended up going up the stairwell and made our way to a locked door. At the time, I was upset that we had just hit a locked door, but now looking back, I'm thankful we hit a locked door because that was the school doing what they've been trained to do. The door was locked, so knowing we didn't have a way of getting in, and hearing on the radio that Officer Rex and Sergeant Mattis had a team and that they were making entry, the decision was made that we'd push back out and link back with try to link up with those officers that were making entry on another side. We ended up cutting through the gymnasium that, like I said, we had already previously had gone through. By that point, Detective Policey had linked up with us along with Detective Cagle, who both are on the same team. When we came in the hallway, that's when you could see down the hallway Sergeant Mattis was standing watching a hallway, and later learned Officer Rex and some others had gone to the right and were clearing rooms. We ran down that hallway because knowing that they were already ahead of us, it was believed those rooms had been cleared. So we linked up with Sergeant Mattis. I told Sergeant Mattis we were with him, and then we continued systematically clearing the rooms that we came upon. At some point around that time frame is when we started hearing the first shots. Once we started hearing the first shots, that's when everything kind of kicked into overdrive for us. We had gone up the stairwell, made our way down the hallway. That's when I ran into that second victim, laid on the ground. We had to push past the victim because we continued to hear more shots being fired. Like Sergeant Mattis stated, it was very distinctive. You could clear as day tell that there were rifle rounds being fired. We came upon a T intersection. Sergeant Mattis was on one side and I was on the other side. We didn't know if the shooter was to the left or the right. Smoke was everywhere. The fire alarm was going off. It was somewhere right around that point we heard another shot, and so it told us that the shooter was to our right. That's when I made the call and yelled that the shooter was right, and we pushed right and continued down that hallway. Officer Rex had caught up to us. I noticed that Officer Rex had a rifle with a LPVO on it. Not knowing where the shooter was and the distance that we would possibly encounter with the shooter, asked Officer Rex to push forward for us, which he did without hesitation. We continued down that path until we encountered the shooter. once the situation was ended with the shooter, like Sergeant Mattis and everybody stated, our job wasn't done. We knew that there was victims. We had to pass those victims. So I immediately switched gears, left that scene, and ran the route that we had just taken back outside. Other officers had responded, and they were making entry on different rooms. It had been broadcasted that the shooter had been taken down, and I think it clicked for every officer that was on scene. And at that point, it was time to start trying to render aid to the victims and start evacuating the school. So we implemented our rescue task force protocol. I ended up coming out of a separate door that we had not made entry into, linked up with one of the ADTEL supervisors that was outside with Commander, and coordinated with the sergeant on where everything had taken place, and to have officers start responding in with us. I remained there for a while until more officers got on scene. When I felt like enough officers were on scene, Commander had stepped up and advised us to step back and go to our vehicles. That was pretty much, at that point I was done with the scene. I wanted to help. I know Officer Rex wanted to help. I know Sergeant Mattis wanted to help and continue to do what we could, but at that point, enough of our co-workers were there, and they were handling it for us. So we were able to step aside. That's when I was able to call my wife and tell her I was okay, advise her of everything, and that